I've lost all faith in my government and the scientists it keeps.
Beware of these governments. They've let you down, they've sold you out, and the whole community is suffering.
But they're all criminals, actually.
They're not ready to give it up now because they'll be exposed as having been wrong all these years.
It's genocide. It's so wrong against the people.
It's the asbestos of tomorrow. It's killing us slowly.
Mainstream media should be absolutely ashamed.
When I saw the extent of the fraud and the funny money, I realised there was a problem.
These lies are just peddled and peddled and peddled. We must stop this, and the truth must be given to the population of Australia once and for all.
This is the livelihood and the well-being of our children and grandchildren that is at stake here.
Sometimes I even question, is life worth living? And I've thought about it, but, you know, if I do that, that just makes the bastards to give what they did to the water, just letting them get away with it. I need to stand and fight and try and gather as much strength as I can.
I'm Anne Bressington. I'm a member of the Legislative Council of South Australia, an independent in the Parliament, and have been looking into fluoride now for probably 6 months, and I'm disgusted at what I found. Fluoride and fluoridation of our water supply, I believe, is one of the greatest health frauds of our time, and it's put many, many people at risk of ill health and pain and suffering in their life.
Water is life. The majority of our bodies are comprised of water. Access to safe water is a fundamental human right. But there is something dark happening in this country, something insidious and inescapable. There is a poison in the tap water with a sinister and dubious history surrounded by ignorance, propaganda, corruption, corporate science and cover-ups. Now, there is more urgency than ever before to expose the truth of this chemical to the public, for it is destined to flow from virtually every last Australian faucet. The poison is fluoride. You have been lied to. And now, the truth. Hello, my name is Jaya Sheila Drama. I'm an independent filmmaker. In September 2010, I was invited by Safe Water advocates from Geelong in Victoria to record the account of a single fluoride hypersensitivity sufferer. However, it quickly became apparent that so many Australian voices were crying out to be heard on this issue that I decided to give this wide variety of individuals the voice they deserved. Out of the flames of growing anger across the nation came Firewater, Australia's industrial fluoridation disgrace, a raw and scathing indictment of Australia's archaic yet all-pervasive mandatory water fluoridation policies, comprised of 19 full interviews. Pro-fluoridation authorities are facing a new threat: informed citizens of the information age who are mobilising as nationwide grassroots community action networks. Firewater is a film for the Australian people, and the people are saying to all water poisoners, you will be held accountable for your actions. You will not poison us, our children, or our environment. Not without a fight. As the waves of truth crash relentlessly upon Australian shores, the fluoridation facade crumbles with each passing day, leaving Australia in the shadows of the medico-scientific dark ages. It may come as a shock to most people that the fluoridation chemicals used to fluoridate water supplies throughout Australia are actually highly toxic industrial waste products scrubbed from pollution smokestacks of big industry. If you are thinking white coats and rigorous pharmaceutical lab testing, forget it. The untreated industrial pollution waste is placed directly into tanker trucks and driven to your local fluoridation plant and added to water at a concentration of, on average, 1 milligram per litre. We are approaching the grounds of Incitec Pivot, a leading global chemicals company based in Geelong, Australia. As you can see, the grounds are lush and green. Quite benign, really. Perhaps this is due to the fact that Incitec specialises in fertiliser manufacturing, as the yellow sign to our left shows. This is the front entrance, and keep in mind for later that this is an industrial chemical plant. My driver, meanwhile, has been filling me on something that locals refer to as airshed. Until now, I've been unfamiliar with this term. Just to the end of this road, more to this phenomena shall be revealed. Employee offices are to our right. And as we travel up the street towards the ocean, just over the water, one can begin to see Alcoa in the distance. Alcoa is an aluminium smelting factory, a process of which fluoride is a major byproduct. The airshed atmospheric discharge from Alcoa's operation is of major concern to many Geelong residents. People are breathing in fluoride fumes and also having toxic pollution particles wash into their rainwater tanks. So back to Pivot. We're now at the rear of the factory, and as you can see, things are not so pretty anymore. It's a dirty area, just as one would expect from an industrial chemical manufacturer. It's hard to make out through the grime, but you can just see Pivot's fertiliser symbol on the centre tank. Pivot, of course, is Australia's leading supplier of fluorosilicic acid. This is a highly corrosive and toxic Schedule 7 poison, which is used to fluoridate drinking water across Australia. You will note the safety data sheet from Incitec Pivot says, quote, an acid and an S7 poison. It is corrosive and toxic, unquote. Charming stuff. But just around the corner from those dirty buildings are decidedly newer facilities. Because the land is your life. Once again, we are reminded that this is a fertiliser industrial plant catering to the farming community, not to formula-fed babies, nor any other consumer of public drinking water. As we travel along, over there, those oversized golf balls, they house a variety of chemicals. It is generally shocking to most people when they first discover that fluoridation chemicals added to their drinking water are untreated toxic industrial waste products, which have never been proven safe for long-term human ingestion. Fluorosilicic acid is recovered from the smokestack scrubbers during the production of phosphate fertiliser and sold around Australia primarily by Incitec Pivot. Why do you think fluoride is dangerous and should not be added to water?
It's a poison. Yeah, it's a poison. And I've done some research, and countries that use it compared to countries that don't use it, there's no benefit with tooth decay, and that's the only reason they put it in our water.
And you were mentioning that you felt it was corrosive. Could you give me firsthand what do you feel about that statement?
Just from what I've seen at work, they had to spend huge amounts of money on the best metals, stainless steel, titanium, whatnot, and it just corrodes everything over a long enough period. It just eat through everything.
Do you think people in Geelong should have a choice whether or not fluoride would be added to their drinking water?
Definitely.
How does it make you feel that they're forcing fluoride?
It's genocide. It's so wrong against the people. Like, water is something we need every day. We shouldn't have to be poisoned by drinking it.
The fluoride chemicals in Australia are either sodium fluoride or two silicofluoride chemicals. Sodium silicofluoride, which is a solid, and hydrofluorosilicic acid, which is a liquid. A lot of the silicofluorides come from inside Tech Pivot in Geelong. Sodium fluoride used to come from aluminium smelting, but nowadays most of the fluoride chemicals used are the two silicofluorides, and they can either be produced locally from inside Tech Pivot, or they can be imported from China particularly, or sometimes Belgium and Japan. But I mean, they are waste products of the fertiliser industry. The silicofluorides are waste products of the fertiliser industry. What happens is that there's fluoride in the phosphate rock along with silicon. When they make superphosphate fertiliser, they're converting insoluble phosphate to soluble phosphate so that plants can take it up. They crush the phosphate rock, they mix it with sulfuric acid, and then you get two gases coming off. You get hydrogen fluoride and you get silicon tetrafluoride. These two gases go into a wet scrubber and they spray water in from the top. And when the gases dissolve in the water, they combine together and they form a new compound called hydrofluorosilicic acid. They then keep on recycling that water through the wet scrubber, dissolving more and more of these gases as they're coming off, until they get to about 25% hydrofluorosilicic acid, which they then send off. They don't clean it up any more than that. They send it off in tankers, rubber lined tankers, to fluoridation plants which are attached to water treatment plants.
Goodness me, I don't think most Australian people are aware of where this chemical actually comes from.
I just wanted to add too, with the sodium silicofluoride, what they do is they then react the hydrofluorosilicic acid with sodium carbonate, or another name for that is soda ash, and then you get the precipitate. They filter the precipitate off, they dry it, they bag it, and they send that to areas that are further away where they can't tanker the liquid form.
What do you think, just as a matter of interest for the viewers, do you think people would actually be horrified if they found out that this is actually what they're drinking?
I think they would. Most people don't want to be drinking toxic waste of any form, and particularly from an aluminium smelting toxic waste or fertiliser toxic waste, you know. And that's why the government tries to deny that it is toxic waste, but that's exactly what it is. They don't deliberately make these fluorides as a product. They're actually a waste product of other industries.
So have these industrial chemicals ever been properly tested for safety?
Never. No.
Anywhere
in the
in the world?
early days, they did toxicity studies on sodium fluoride, but that was pharmaceutical grade sodium fluoride. They have never ever tested the silicofluoride chemicals, particularly the industrial grade that they use, because they don't clean them up. They are allowed to have small amounts of heavy metals in these chemicals.
The silicofluorides, that's fluorosilicic acid and the sodium salt of it, they're nowadays sourced from the phosphate fertiliser industry, down here in Geelong from Incitec Pivot Fertilisers. They're a waste product from manufacturing the fertiliser. After the rock's crushed and boiled up in sulfuric acid, the waste fumes that would normally go out the chimney stack would carry a huge amount of fluoride. But they capture it in the wet scrubbing system, the pollution scrubbing system, and those tanks of captured pollution effluent are then what's sold to water authorities for putting into water supplies as fluoridation. So it's really a raw, unpurified pollution extract from industry, which is really unfortunate because they're contaminated as well. I mean, they're 90% fluoride, but they also contain mercury, arsenic, lead and other very, very toxic heavy metal contaminants. But the other part of your question was about testing for safety. No, those silicofluorides have had, to the best of my knowledge, no safety testing at all. And by that I mean the kind of safety testing that's required for medical drugs. They've never gone through that process. In the US, they've never been approved by the FDA for human administration. And in Australia, the TGA, the Therapeutic Goods Administration, has never undertaken any testing at all. So government relies on vague claims like, well, we don't see people dropping dead in the street when we fluoridate a town, so therefore it must be safe.
Does it get eliminated out of the body?
Fluoride is cumulative. You can eliminate, a healthy person can eliminate about half of what they ingest per day. The rest is stored in bones or affects thyroid gland, pineal gland and a few other body systems. But a person with poor kidneys eliminates less than half, almost none. So people with kidney disease are at especially great risk of toxic effects from fluoride.
And that's very interesting you mentioned Belgium, because Belgium is where Queensland get their fluoride from.
Oh, of course, yes. Well, see, they're so smart, they don't have it. So they send it to us to put in the dumb Australians' water, you see, to dumb us down. And it's working. But yes, that's your silicofluoride poisons. That is a combination of your sodium silicofluoride and your sodium hexafluorosilicate. So drink up, Queenslanders, drink up, Australians. And this is also the other one. This is also the other one you get in your water supplies, which is the sodium fluoride. This is the bed buddy of this one. Dangerous, toxic by, it's poison of course, toxic by ingestion. Target organs are your kidneys, your bones, your central nervous system, your gastrointestinal system and your teeth. So how smart are we?
So to me, no matter how much we're out there saying it's a toxic waste, people don't get it. It doesn't sink in because it is beyond their belief that a government would do this. Like, no, I've had people say to me, well, why would a government put poison in our water? And I go, well, I don't really know. I think it's got something to do with money, you know? But they don't get it.
How it's made and the components, you know, it's not just fluoride, but silica fluorides come packaged up with other contaminants such as lead, arsenic, cadmium, radon, mercury. They all come because it's an industrial waste product that they actually dump into the water supply with no processing, straight from the chimneys, repackaged into the water. And so people often don't realise that they're not even getting a pharmaceutical grade fluoride in the drinking water. I mean, that to me is a total insult. And even more worrying is that politicians don't know where the fluoride comes from. They don't. Now, I've just found out we're getting our source from China. So we're getting all their industrial pollutants repackaged for us. You don't know what's in there. Who's tested it? Where are the test results to show what the ingredients are, what it's made up of, how much fluoride is in there and how much other stuff is in there? We don't know. The politicians don't know. Who's running the show here?
It's interesting Sandy should bring up this point. She is correct. The vast majority of the time, we basically have no idea of the contaminant levels in the toxic junk cocktail of each batch of fluorosilicic acid or its bed buddies. She is also correct that China supplies some fluoride to Australia. However, soon after interviewing Sandy, when filming the Adelaide portion of this documentary, we were fortunate enough to be handed an exclusive Freedom of Information package by the Honourable Anne Bressington MLC and Dr. Andrew Harms. This includes analysis of various batches of silica fluoride poisons, each of which is unique in chemical composition. The full documentation of the raw chemical analysis is available at the link provided on the screen. This freedom of information will shock most viewers. Aluminium, up to 71 milligrams per litre. Arsenic, 5.2 milligrams a litre. Mercury, 7.9 milligrams a litre. Even uranium. And the list goes on and on. We are even so blessed to have sodium fluoride certificate of analysis from Shanghai, China. But before we all rush to our kitchen taps for a drink, back to Sandy.
I think that water authorities are always looking to make a bigger profit and to look to buy it in cheaper, and the Chinese sources are much cheaper, and they're following the American lead, and this sourcing their fluoride, sodium silica fluoride from China has become a big trend in America, which Australian water authorities are now starting to follow one by one. So in the past, we had probably most of our fluoride products coming from local chemical companies, but that's shifting now.
So I've travelled around and we're now in Port Macquarie in New South Wales, a beautiful coastal town. Dr. Alexander, are most other dentists you know aware that water fluoridation chemicals are actually industrial grade waste products?
Well, from my personal research, I would say the majority of them are not aware. A lot of them do know, and they do know what it is, but they still believe somehow that the government is right in doing what it's doing, and they believe that they're doing citizens a favour by supporting water fluoridation. However, when I graduated from university, we weren't given any information about where it came from. We all assumed it was calcium fluoride. We would have thought they wouldn't have put anything else other than pharmaceutical grade fluoride into the water. Then the ADA was very good at covering up what the actual chemicals being used were and where they were from. Many times I contacted the ADA and said, what exactly is this chemical that's going into the water? Where is it from? You know, at that stage I already knew, and I had a pretty good idea of what it was, but I got replies like, thank you for your comments, Dr. Alexander. Don't bother contacting us again, basically. So now, probably in the last, I don't know, 5 to 8 years, the ADA has actually put on their website the fact that it is hydrofluorosilicic acid is the main chemical being used in Australia to fluoridate the water supply. So there is absolutely no excuse for any dentist out there to say they don't know what it is.
Do you think they'd be shocked if they knew that this was the case?
Yeah, well, I've confronted quite a few dentists and said, do you know, do you realise? And they have acted shocked, but not shocked enough to go away and do anything about it or do much research.
Do you know where the fluoridation chemicals come from?
I have been told that they're coming, the ones that are coming to Port Macquarie are coming from Incitec Pivot, a phosphate fertiliser company in Geelong, and I suspect that we will also be receiving chemicals from China.
Fluoridation chemicals are made from?
They're made from superphosphate manufacturing, also aluminium production, and they're collected in the smokestacks, they're wetted down and collected in a liquid form, put in barrels and marked highly toxic, dangerous, S7 poison, and shipped off to councils to drip into our water supply. Industrial grade. We're drinking industrial grade fluoride chemicals. Yeah.
From the fresh fluoridation battle hotspot of Port Macquarie, we travel to the long-time stronghold for the fluoride faithful. But as unbelievable as it may seem, even this neck of the woods has been giving fluoride pushers headaches of late. Thanks to the courageous individuals such as Anne Bressington and a certain prominent dentist who the Australian Dental Association now wishes never called himself a past president. But some histories are set in stone. Dr. Andrew Harms, former president of the Australian Dental Association's South Australia branch, realised more than a decade ago that something was terribly wrong with water fluoridation. Since then, he has appeared on programs such as Today Tonight to voice his concerns, travelled with Dr. Paul Connaught around Australia, and given numerous guest speaker presentations on the issue. Dr. Harms was one of only 2 Australians to attend the 28th International Society for Fluoride Research Conference in 2008 in Toronto, Canada. The other was Firewater's production manager, Anna Mikhailik.
And when I did read the science about 10 years ago, I started to get serious concerns. And my concerns were based around the fact that I didn't realise that we weren't using natural fluoride, so-called natural fluoride, or calcium fluoride, but we were using a common industrial waste. This industrial waste is mainly coming from the superphosphate industry, but also recently from industrial waste from China, of which we don't have a really good idea of the origins. I didn't realise that fluoridation involved dumping about 700 tonnes of industrial waste, mainly from the superphosphate industry, into Adelaide's water supply. And it's not a pharmaceutical grade, it's an industrial grade. Some of the contaminants are aluminium, mercury, low levels of uranium, beryllium, cadmium. And this has quite shocked me because there are no long-term studies looking at the effect of dosing millions of people with hundreds of tonnes of chemicals every year.
Perhaps you might just give us a little bit of information about the book that you're holding.
Yes, look, there's a fantastic new book co-authored by Professor Paul Connaught, The Case Against Fluoride. And this book is just fantastic. And I'm going to trawl through it several times, but I commend everybody to get a copy of this and have a thorough read. The other book that's very good is The Fluoride Deception by Chris Bryson. And that was the book that showed the skullduggery of the American government, the United States government, and Alcoa and other industrial groups in pushing fluoridation to the community in the 40s and 50s. Chris Bryson's book was my turning point, and when I saw the extent of the fraud and the funny money that went to validate fluoridation, I realised there was a problem.
This is Insitec at Geelong, where they make the fluoroacetic acid. They're putting in my local water supplies in Geelong. They claim that this is all good for our children, and I do not want this stuff being drunk by my children, especially my disabled child with compromised kidneys.
This is Jessica, Scott's daughter. Her father refused to pay for silica fluoride poisoned water supplied by his local water supplier Barwon Water under government orders. Jessica is a cancer survivor. Following chemotherapy and her illness, Jessica's kidneys are severely compromised. Her overall disposition is such that she is highly sensitive to all dietary and environmental toxins. Scott is now being threatened with actions by authorities attempting to force him to pay for poisoned water that could harm his daughter. Water that contains a medication to which he did not give his consent. Water containing a medication to which he did not consent to on behalf of his children. Water containing a medication never properly tested for safety for long-term human administration. An industrial-grade Schedule 7 poison laced with toxic heavy metal contaminants, scrubbed from the pollution smokestacks of industry.
My story started, especially been interested in this 4 years ago when my daughter was diagnosed with a tumour. Before that I wasn't active in anything. I spent 1 year while she went through hell getting chemo and radiotherapy. Out of that she lost her eyesight, some of her mobility, some of her IQ, and her kidneys and other bodily organs have been left damaged. She's a happy girl, but we still have to look after her 24/7. Since they've put fluoride in our water, I've had to look that up, ever wary of any sort of toxins in my daughter's diet. And after a lot of educating myself, I've come to the conclusion, just on the facts and the science, that I cannot let my daughter drink this stuff. It's not only not what we consider good fluoride, it also has other toxins like lead, cadmium, and there's a whole list. And it's been verified by Australian television that this is in our water. The government's doing this. They've omitted facts. They've lied to us, and I cannot let my water or any other of my children drink this toxic soup that they're claiming is beneficial for their teeth. Before that I was blissfully unaware of what fluoride was. It was in the toothpaste and that was all, and I believed my government, but after this I've no faith whatsoever in either my government or the people pushing this. In my point of view, they should have their licences, their medical licences taken off them. They've lied to us. They sit there with cheesy grins. I believe truly that they know they're lying to us. And after viewing the facts of fluoride, or the fluoric acid, I have to seriously come to the conclusion that this has been put in for totally other reasons, mainly so that our industry can get rid of their toxic waste cheaply, because they can't dump it anywhere. It costs them millions, as I've found out through my own research. And I think there's some backroom deals going on, and they're just filling our water with this crap, and filling our children with this crap.
Here we have a state which says you must do this, you must drink this, you must eat this, we know it's good for you, and yet no one checks, no one takes responsibility. So what's happening there? You have to take the responsibility yourself for something someone else is doing to you. That's a crime.
How does
You
that
have
make
no
you
choice.
feel? How does that make you feel as a parent?
Oh, terrible, because I want to protect my children. I want to give them every opportunity to be healthy and happy and functional in the community. And, you know, I love them dearly. It makes me feel really helpless.
Well, first, it's the duty of any government to have clean air, clean water, and basics for health. And I feel that if you're going to medicate a population, the first thing you should not do is add anything to the water supply. The water supply should be clean. We put, as far as I can see, we put a little bit of fluoride in the water, and that is considered a medication. The dentists often talk about having fluoride much the same way as you'd have a bleach or chlorine in the water. And this, of course, is just a nonsense. What happens is that you put the fluoride in the water to treat people, whereas you put the chlorine in the water to treat the water. Those are two amazingly different concepts. And what you find in the dental health section is they try to muddy the water using those two analogies. I'm really passionate about the fact that babies under 6 months should have absolutely no fluoride. This is a time when the young brain is growing. It's a time when the blood-brain barrier is not yet solid. It's a time when these babies are at a huge inclination for an insult. And this is why when over recent times even the Lancet paper have suggested that fluoridated water should be actually considered as a toxic element. And I think there's a good reason for that. 1 in 6 kids these days have a problem with brain function, have a problem with behaviour. Whether it's ADHD, whether it's autism or whatever it is, young brains are very, very apt to have a problem with any sort of a chemical, with any sort of an enzyme inhibitor. And fluoride is an enzyme inhibitor, and this is why I'm passionately against putting fluoride in the water.
With mothers, they have been misled because they have been told that it's quite safe to add fluoridated water to infant formula, and this is completely wrong. The amount of fluoride in fluoridated water, there is a tiny amount of fluoride in breast milk. It's like 0.004 parts per million. It's a minute amount. The amount of fluoride in fluoridated water is 250 times the amount of that would be in breast milk. So nature's actually trying to keep babies away from fluoride. But mothers haven't been told this. The American Dental Association in 2006 started warning that if babies were going to be fed with infant formula reconstituted with tap water, it would be wise to use non-fluoridated tap water. Mothers, the Australian public, have been deliberately misled by fluoridation promoters in Australia.
The first thing is that the mother's breasts appear to reduce the fluoride levels and she provides milk with approximately 0.013 milligrams per litre of fluoride in it. If you then think about the replacement of that with a formula and you use a 1 milligram per litre fluoridated water from the tap and allow for a little bit of evaporation during the heating of that water in the formula, you're dosing the baby at 100 times the natural level. Now, that bothers me because there seemed to be no problem with the level that was in the female breasts before fluoridation, and in fact the New Zealand and Australian authorities accepted that the level in the female breast were at 0.013 milligrams per litre was suitable and the proper level. But when you go to the extremes of putting fluoride in everybody's water, then there are no exclusions to who gets it, and in this case the infants get about 100 times more than they would if they were being breastfed. The body certainly didn't evolve to be exposed to those levels, so it would be my opinion that it was the wrong thing to do.
Dr. John Colquhoun, a New Zealand dental researcher, states, quote, "Common sense should tell us that if a poison circulating in a child's body can damage the tooth-forming cells, then other harm is also likely," unquote. Australian authorities dismiss dental fluorosis as just a cosmetic effect. Do you believe that this is an irresponsible position to take whilst Australian children are being toxically overexposed to fluoride?
Totally irresponsible. Totally irresponsible. Why should they have more fluoride? They've already had toxic doses. Who says they need it? Who says it's not already in their bodies? And why aren't they being tested for fluoride in their bodies? And that can be done. You know, and that's what we've been asking for in this community. Test our community first. We may already have fluoride. You're telling us we need it. How about find out if we already have it? And we're definitely being exposed to it on a daily basis.
Well, people often ask me how I got involved, and I have to sort of tongue-in-cheek tell them that I've never been in favour of poisoning people. And I get all sorts of reactions from that. But basically, when you're taught to be a doctor, you're taught to at least do no harm, and that is at the background, coupled with an evolving interest due to my father's influence and studying nutrition and getting involved in more natural remedies. That's got stronger. However, I have all the orthodox qualifications in general practice and children's health and nutrition, but I've been the Queensland Chair of the Australian College of Nutritional and Environmental Medicine and the Australian Integrative Medical Association. And as I mentioned before, for 6 years I was a member of the Complementary Medicine Evaluation Committee of the Therapeutic Good Administration. So that's my background, and I suppose that's what's driven me. I suppose, touching on what Jeannie just said, it is, I suppose one thing that TGA experience taught you is to evaluate research, and when the National Research Committee in the United States in 2006 has 500 studies and 1,000 references indicating there are difficulties with teeth fluorosis, with skeletal problems, with thyroid function, with brain function, osteogenic sarcoma, and a situation led by dentists who are primarily interested in teeth and not the rest of the body, or public servants who seem to be driven by a political and not a medical agenda, quite happily brush that aside. And it's quite astounding that has been allowed to get through a system. The benefits of fluoridation are minimal, if any, and the research supports that as well.
I'm Doug Ebringham. I was a family doctor in Rockhampton 40 odd years ago, and I wrote to the paper saying what a good thing fluoridation was. Then I started to find evidence that there was not all good things come out of fluoridation, and I changed my mind, and I've been studying the subject from that point of view ever since. Well, the profession is waking up to the fallacies of fluoride promotion. It's rhetoric, not science. We need the all health professionals, teachers and researchers to look at the things from the objective point of view and not to the political and rhetoric point of view. Look for the money trail. Decades ago, it was the aluminium industry providing most of the fluoride waste, and they were the ones that were sponsoring surveys of public health. But they only did it for teeth. They ignored and they failed to investigate other organs of the body, the thyroid gland, the bones, and every other part of the body is affected.
What about effective? The word effective, they say it's safe and effective. Would you agree that water fluoridation is effective in stopping or reducing tooth decay?
I don't say it is, only on the word of dentists I've spoken to who've done proper research and published research into the effectiveness of it. And I haven't been all that concerned with that aspect because I've been focusing on the side effects. But with the studies that have been done where there's been a proper statistical analysis, scientific analysis done on effectiveness, they cannot differentiate any significant difference between the tooth decay rates in unfluoridated cities and fluoridated cities.
For example, look at Queensland, that was never fluoridated except for a couple of small towns until 2009, and yet right through the 1980s, 1990s and the early 2000s, the tooth decay rates for all ages in Queensland were no different to Victoria and New South Wales that had been fluoridated for 20 and 30 years. So there is no evidence for benefits. And then look at Europe, Switzerland, Sweden, Belgium, Netherlands, Germany, France, all the countries across Europe that do not fluoridate their water generally have lower tooth decay rates than these fluoridated states in Victoria.
Dr. John Cahoon, the Chief dental health officer in New Zealand, he could find no difference at all in the tooth decay rates between the fluoridated and unfluoridated cities. Dr. Philip Sutton and Sir Arthur Amys in Australia published an article pointing out the mistakes in all the studies that had assumed there was a benefit from fluoride, and various other researchers have done enormous studies where they cannot find any significant difference. So it appears to be more claims made about the benefits. But as I say, if there's any harm confirmed from the treatment, then the effectiveness or otherwise is totally irrelevant. It can't be given as a treatment if it's harming patients, forcing them to have the treatment regardless of its effectiveness.
I did become rather concerned about fluoride because I think there are reasons to believe that it's not actually efficacious in terms of tooth decay, preventing tooth decay, and that it could be harmful in other respects as well to health. I mean, there are a lot of experts forming this opinion now, and in Europe they're basically taking fluoride out of their water supplies to a large extent. I think it's an antiquated technology basically that could be quite harmful, and I suspect we're probably better off without it. It's pretty clear that a lot of people are very concerned about it, and you meet individuals who say they've been made sick through fluoride, and they're not pretending. I mean, there's medical evidence for it, but there is medical evidence that fluoride does adversely affect some people at least. Perhaps they have particular susceptibility, but there are people who are harmed by fluoride, by drinking fluoride.
In terms of where we should be heading with fluoridation, critically there is a need for researching the safety of the treatment. First and foremost, even more than the effectiveness of it. Because at the moment, from the clinical studies that I'm seeing with patients, they appear to be getting affected by the fluoridated water, and often badly, to the point of being where the fluoridated water is indeed a risk to their life. And that is not only recognised by myself, and the patients and their families, but also by their dentists and doctors are also very aware that this is the case. So it is critical that the government starts working towards resolving this question about its safety, because no doctor should ever be giving a treatment totally unaware of the safety aspects of it. And secondly, the safety aspects are not being pursued, not being looked at. And that is completely unprofessional for any practitioner to pursue such a line of irresponsibility with their own treatment of patients, and for the government to be giving a treatment where they appear also to be not pursuing the aspects of, is our treatment of the community by fluoridating their water safe, is quite irresponsible. And as I say, when I've pursued that with health authorities and said, could they do studies into the safety with patients who appear to be getting sick, then so far there's been a complete refusal to do any such assessment.
In terms of what I've done, I did actually get a private members' bill passed the upper house of the Victorian Parliament at the end of 2007. And the private members' bill would have required the Victorian government to obtain the consent of affected people before new parts of Victoria could be fluoridated. It passed the upper house, which was quite an achievement, but the government, I would say, probably sabotaged it in the lower house and saw that it didn't get anywhere there. So unfortunately it didn't become law, but I feel there was something of a moral victory to get it passed in one house anyway.
So what symptoms do you actually get from continuing to use fluoridated water?
Okay, headaches, itchy skin. If I wash my hands all day with the water, they'll just go red and feel like fine-grade sandpaper, and then the skin will just start splitting open and bleeding. These days, when I have my once-a-week shower, I usually vomit within the first 24 hours, and I'm in bed for 2 days because I just can't move. Wobbly legs, dizziness, just extreme exhaustion, and the brain is just not working at all.
The American report, which recommended the testing be done, was just reflecting the identical request from the National Health and Medical Research Council in 1991 that said that testing into sensitivity to fluoride must be carried out. And as a result, the NHMRC now appear to be going against the earlier recommendation without that testing ever having been done. And from the clinical evidence, it appears that that was a rather bad oversight on their part. So the American research in 2006 is now recommending that that be done again, and this is where, of course, it would result in an explanation as to why people are getting sick from the fluoride exposure on a scientific level.
But if you go, do you go on holidays?
I can't go on holidays because where in Australia is there no fluoridation. Okay, you can go to a little country town, but it might be exciting, but basically if I want a decent holiday and have a relaxing time not having to do anything, I have to go overseas. Europe, Scandinavian countries cannot afford that.
Why Scandinavia specifically?
They've got no fluoride in their water. They've taken it out. The supermarkets are saying they have not sold so much, spring water or no water than ever before. Since the fluoride's gone in, they're making that much money on bottled water. It's just amazing.
What a tragedy it is that in this once pure and healthy nation, it is now so difficult to find pure drinking water as nature intended. Trusted sources such as Green Hill Springs still exist, but cannot cater to the needs of an entire nation due to limited capacity and supply. What a tragedy that simply turning on the kitchen tap or running the garden hose entails the transference of industrial waste. Pure water is no longer available and free to all. Big industry holds our purity hostage, more so with each passing day.
And that's just what's happening. That's part of the bigger picture.
Do you know much about filters at all?
I have researched.
The sort of filters that are needed to take or remove fluoridation?
Well, first of all, boiling will only concentrate the amount of fluoride in the water. It's extremely hard to get rid of out of water. Most carbon filters, carbon filters particularly is what most people use, won't remove it.
You're going to be looking at full-on 4 or 5 stage filters, and to really do a good job of it you need a commercial filtration system like a reverse osmosis, but that'll take it out, the full big commercial ones, but like who's got 10 to 20 grand plus to buy one, plus environmentally it's a disaster because 50% of the water is wasted, and that has got all the heavy metals and the fluoride, all the chemicals that are part of the fluoride mixture, they get taken out and it goes back into the ground, so you're polluting your own property with chemicals that are toxic. But I can't afford a filtration system, and as far as I'm concerned, the government should be buying me one. But will they? No, because fluoride doesn't make you sick according to them.
Yeah, and like you say, so many people can't either afford it or don't have the space for a tank. Many people couldn't afford to buy the amount of bottled water you would need for all of your cooking and even showering. Some people get quite harmed by showering in fluoridated water. Sensitive people get prickly rashes and absorb that water. Bathing in it, you absorb a lot of fluoride from bathing in a warm fluoride bath. No, it's ridiculous to think that people who need to escape fluoride can go and organise their own water supply. We all pay our water rates for a proper clean water supply, and in fluoridated towns we're not getting it.
So even if you avoid fluoridated tap water, how do you avoid products that may have been processed with fluoridated water?
You can't avoid it. That's the simple fact, you can't avoid it. Like I've had people say, oh well, if you don't want to drink it, get a tank. It's not that simple. You can reduce a little bit your consumption by drinking, either tank water or cask water. But still, unless you've got a massive amount of money to get a whole house filter on your home, you're showering in it, you're washing your babies in it, all your gardens hosed with it, all your plants, your vegetables, all the fruit and food you buy is all manufactured with tap water.
I have particular concerns in South Australia, and especially in Adelaide, of where this fluoridated chemical waste goes, because only 5% of that 700 tonnes ends up in people's bodies. The rest is excreted and flushed down our drains, so 95% at least of this 700 tonnes goes to our sewage plants. Now the big issue is, okay, that goes to sea and they've managed to sanitise the waste and get away with it and get it out of the reaches of the EPA. What I am concerned about is the thousands upon thousands of litres of this sewage waste that goes through treatment plants and ends up in the Virginia fruit and vegetable area. If this fluoridated waste containing the arsenic, the uranium, the beryllium, the cadmium and other products, other heavy metals, ends up in being a treated wastewater going to produce Adelaide's vegetables, I have concerns that there may be health implications from that, and I am going to in the future investigate that issue.
And it's been proven that it's harmful to fish. In fact, I believe it will stop a salmon run. I mean, you put it into the water supplies, so then it gets back into the rivers, doesn't it? Because the stuff is released into the rivers. And it's really bad for fish. So if it's bad for fish, it's obviously an environmental toxin. And it's not supposed to be put into rivers. So they dilute it with our water supplies. It's a way of laundering a poison.
Dr. Spittle has condensed the medical literature that reported on side effects from many doctors, dentists and scientists doing government work and their own clinical observations, and he's listed around about 24 different common symptoms of fluoride toxicity. And that's really important because most doctors and dentists are informed it's completely safe. And this is difficult to focus on just, is fluoride causing the skin rash? Is fluoride causing the abdominal pain? Is it causing the muscle fatigue? Because I can go on for 20 or so different common symptoms, and this is where they normally get treated with anti-inflammatories, cortisone for the skin rash. But doctors and dentists are not generally aware of what side effects to look for. Dr. Spittle's work is critical for health practitioners who are dealing with the public who may be getting affected by fluoride to become clinically aware of what they should be looking for. And Dr. Spittle's work also shows the testing procedures of how to avoid the exposure to the fluoride and then watch to see a change in symptoms. So clinically it's very, very relevant.
There's labourers and sports people who have many times the risk, the pathology, the toxicology comes in from 0.7 to 2.3 parts per million. So if you're taking 0.9 parts per million, if people have 2 or 3 times, they're an enormous risk, and there are a lot of them. There's certain teas and wines and soft drinks and juices and raisins, potatoes and cheese and grapes, foods which concentrate this and have done so in America. So it's in the environment so much, they need to have a look at what people are getting. And then you have the issue of people who can't excrete it. And then as well, we said at the end, there's this enormous problem of the hypersensitive people. There's a lot written about at the end of the spectrum, there are 7 or 8 or 9 or 10% of people, well, it's going to be 1% of people allergic to fluoride. So in this state, there'll be 42,000 people allergic to fluoride getting no medical help whatsoever, because the doctors and dentists don't believe in it. Who's going to tell them? So if their rash gets better or they're worse, or their migraine gets worse, or their gut symptoms get worse, who's going to tell them? And it's often the more vulnerable and sick people.
Originally I was in Bacchus Marsh when they put fluoride in the industry, and I'm here to simply warn the community and help other people understand what is going on around them. Initially, when they put fluoride in the water, I was sold a bill of goods that was not true, false, and as a consequence, the longer I lived, the more I suffered. I developed all sorts of heinous diseases, bone density problems, thyroid problems, liver, kidney damage, diabetes, without proper diagnosis and without proper treatment. I found that it was a waste of time going to the medical profession for help.
Fluoride is documented as causing renal damage, and Brian was one of the first people in Victoria to be exposed to fluoridation in the water. It's hard to isolate exact causes of organ damage, but his shows also associated gastrointestinal impairments, so it's reasonable to think that fluoride played a role in it.
Probably about 25 years ago, I read an article on water fluoridation and I very quickly realised what a con it was. It didn't work. It's a poison that's been put in our water supply, and it harms people. And I vowed there and then when I read this article that, you know, if it ever happened to our water supply, I'd walk the streets. I didn't want that going into my family's drinking water. About that time, unbeknownst to me, my sister was living in Townsville, and for about 4 years, and as soon as she got to Townsville, she had massive problems with dermatitis. She was going to uni. She would come back here every university holidays, and her dermatitis would clear up. She'd go back there, it'd break out again, and it was really painful and distressing to her. We would send her up all these various creams and potions and things, and nothing helped. She'd go to dermatologists, nothing would help. Just before she was about to leave Townsville to come back to Brisbane, this doctor said to her that she might have a fluoride allergy. Well, she didn't even realise that Townsville's water was fluoridated, and that sort of basically confirmed my, opinion that we do not want this in our water.
So perhaps you could expand a little bit on the financial risks that fluoride has actually caused you to take.
Well, for starters, I've had to get in large amounts of drinking water. There's actually 9 in my house all up, in a very small house. You don't actually realise how much water you actually use just in everyday living. At one stage, I was actually trying to wash the clothes and bathe the children in proper drinking water. But, it's just too expensive. I'm on a carer's pension. We struggle. We just hold the fort money-wise, and this is a massive burden financially on me. I've had to get a small tank in, which we get water off our roof, but with the amount of companies around Geelong spewing toxic waste into our airshed, I don't even know how safe that is, and I've got no way of testing it. So we've had to go back to washing our clothes and bathing our children in a carcinogenic soup that our government tells us is good for us, that formerly used to have to be dumped at toxic waste sites.
It was every time I went to Melbourne and had a cup of tea, and either the vegetables were boiled in the water, it just swelled my face and lips and tongue and throat every time.
You don't go out?
No.
We don't go. No, we go. I can, but Olive can't. So it restricts me for where I can go because I like to do things with my wife. So if we buy anything at all, it's usually say fish and chips. You know, that doesn't involve water. But anything that involves being cooked in fluoride water is a no-no.
So that's a very restrictive lifestyle because of the fluoride poisoning.
I'm very excited to see that there are people who refuse to pay their water bills now when their water becomes fluoridated. Now that's an extreme step, but I think it's a very valid and reasonable way of taking non-violent but very strong action to show that you won't tolerate being poisoned by water authorities and by governments.
But apparently these people are now criminals because they're not paying their water bills. Haven't they got a right to refuse water that they don't want to drink or bathe in?
Yes, they should have that right, and we should not have to pay for water that we're trying as hard as we can not to use, and having to spend a lot of our own money to organise our filtration systems and alternative supplies of water.
And those people voted up in Mildura. And one of the things they voted for was to exercise a sanction. And that sanction was that they not pay rates in protest, not only water rates, but land rates as well. So they've created for themselves a legal entitlement to not pay the rates. Now that's quite unique, and of course that's radical. However, this is a radical problem requiring quite, as it were, an appropriate response. Now, when somebody forcefully medicates, it's a violation of a human right, a fundamental human right of consent. That violation cannot go unanswered. It's not for the government to decide for us what's right and wrong for us when it comes to our own bodies. It must be we, the people, that have an informed consent.
Medicating the water with fluoride does violate every individual's freedom of choice, and yet for some reason governments take it on themselves to think they have the right to run a health program that overrides everybody's normal medical free choice and right to informed consent. So it's a kind of medical tyranny.
So where do you see this heading for your family, the situation that you're in with your family?
Well, it looks like if the government's going to take legal action against me, especially in a commercial court where my story won't be heard, it's just, do I owe the money? Pay up. If you don't pay up, we'll take your house. I'm going to have to fold on my non-payment, which was just trying to get the government to listen to me. I thought maybe someone would listen if I didn't pay the bill, but I'm just going to get railroaded there, and I know that. And I'm scared shitless of losing my house. It's the only thing I've got. It's the roof over my children's head.
And you feel that all of this has been caused because you simply refuse, that you've been railroaded into having to pay for water that has a chemical that actually your daughter particularly is severely allergic to, and all of this has been caused because of that.
Well, the way my daughter is with a compromised system after the year-long chemo, I mean, her kidneys, her thyroids, they wouldn't be able to handle it. it'd wipe her out. I can't allow her to have one drop, and because I know it's so deadly, even for my other children, I can't allow them to have it. I've done the research, it accumulates in your bones.
We also know that we only excrete between 20 and 50% of the fluoride that we ingest. It is bioaccumulative. That means that the remainder of the fluoride in our system collects in our bones, in our muscles and in our soft tissue. And we now know there is information out there to show that our Aboriginal people are highly sensitive to fluoride because of their small kidneys. Are we going to stop with this genocide of our Aboriginal people and making the rest of the community ill? Are we going to take a stand and say stop now, or are we going to wait until this is too late, until it's gone too far? And it will take us decades to recover from the damage that's been done.
I don't really have a social life. Most of my, I haven't got any, I've only got 2 friends, and they've stuck by me, especially one of them. He's just been absolutely amazing. And I've got my mother, who I do care for, so that's sort of like social contact, and I've got a special needs young adult son, and so that's virtually my social life, helping them and doing things for them. No more Saturday lunches with friends, because I just can't go to a pub or a restaurant and eat the meals there. I just get very sick, and my friends just don't understand it, because it's just like a peanut allergy. Not everybody is, allergic to the fluoride or has any problems with it, and so my friends, they're okay, and they just cannot understand how I'm so sick. It's just very hard for them to wrap their heads around it, so they've just walked away, and I just hole up here. I'm a prisoner in my own home. I'm safe here without the exposure.
It's very unethical. It goes against all the principles of informed consent for staff, and medical informed consent. How dare they? I mean, they put these chemicals that are industrial waste products into our water, ostensibly to treat our teeth, to decrease tooth decay or prevent tooth decay, which doesn't work, by the way. But I mean, if you're a patient and you go to a doctor, the doctor will assess your need for medication. They will follow you up. They will have a dose for you, whether you're a child or an adult or an elderly person. If you have specific medical conditions that may not be suitable, they won't put you on that drug. They'll put you on a different drug. This is never considered with fluoridation. We have the right to choose our medication, and this goes against that completely.
We talked before about India and China. They have it naturally in there, and they know how bad it is. It belongs to the toxic chemical thing with aluminium and mercury and fluoride. They're down that end as toxic chemicals, and for many years before water fluoridation became popular, it was a rat sack, wasn't it? It was there to kill things. It's poisonous.
Worries me that governments can see fit to mass medicate us by putting fluoride, which is a toxic chemical waste, into our water. As a housewife, I would like to ask who is accountable for putting this in our water. You hear all of these abbreviations, ADA, AMA, NH, MRC, etc. and so forth. Are there real people behind these companies? Do they have children? Do they have grandchildren? Do they care? Do they care about us, the community, who largely are uneducated on this hydrofluorosilicic acid, if I can say it? We don't know who is apathetic here. Is it our so-called medical bodies? Have they really researched it? Have they looked into it? Let's make them accountable. I want them to be accountable, and let us know the truth.
What it should be the subject of is scientific testing. We need to have scientific testing, and that hasn't been done. And when fluoride was brought in here in Australia, a lot of doctors and scientists were against it, and the tests to prove whether it was safe or not were discontinued before it was put in the water supply. And the NHMRC said about 18 years ago, I think it was, that this stuff should be tested for efficacy and safety, and it's never been done. This has been in the hands of dentists. Dentists don't have the knowledge about the human body. And the other issue I cannot understand is why we have Nobel laureates in medicine who say that this is bad for the body, bad for the brain, bad for babies.
Well, yes, you know what? We are very medically backwards, and we're scientifically backwards, and I would even call it religious, because what we're expected to do is believe something someone's invented with no science backup, ignoring all the facts of the toxicity. And if you're supposed to believe something and ignore all the data and all the facts, then that to me is a religion. I don't want to base my life on a religious belief. I want the real science. I want the facts. I want this country, I want the Australian government to commission an independent study, not funded by Colgate or any of the chemical companies or the companies making a profit from the fluoride, the phosphate, the chemicals. None of those companies should be involved.
I cannot understand it. I really can't. It's a very unscientific attitude that's being displayed by the health department, and it seems as if they care more about the fact that it might be revealed that they've made a mistake, and maybe they might get sued by people who've been injured by fluoride, and they're, in a way, it's comparable to the cover-up that went on about asbestos and cigarettes.
It should be an independent commission, a study which is completely detached and autonomous to really look into the science, how much we are consuming, how much is in the food and the water and the pharmaceuticals, so we actually know how much we're getting. Otherwise, it's all based on assumption, and the risks of getting too much fluoride are so huge that it cannot be ignored.
In 2007, Australia's National Health and Medical Research Council released a report titled A Systematic Review of the Safety and Efficacy of Fluoridation.
Fluoridation promoters and enforcers around the fluoridating world, but particularly in Australia, have popped champagne corks ever since.
On the surface, such reports from authoritative research bodies appear to present a solid case for fluoridation to the general public.
Prominent fluoridation promoters, such as Premier Anna Bligh in Queensland, her possible successor John Paul Langbrook, and Dr. John Carney, Victoria's Chief Health Officer, have cited this report time and time again to justify forcing fluoride on populations across the nation. Meanwhile, the gaping research gaps highlighted in previous international reviews, such as the 2000 University of York Review, are ignored and spun by Australian promoters to suit their own ends.
Furthermore, truly in-depth reports such as the 2006 United States National Research Council report, Fluoride in Drinking Water, which do indeed set alarm bells ringing for the health dangers of fluoridation, are conveniently ignored, even by the Australian NHMRC review.
what are your views on the NHMRC report? And do you believe it addresses all fluoridation health concerns adequately?
No, it doesn't. It was a report whipped up by 2 report writers in Sydney, a small company, who were contracted by the NHMRC. They made a number of very big errors, and one of them was to leave out any studies on fluoride's effect on kidneys or the effect of fluoride on kidney patients. Now, they were supposed to include a section on that. I've seen minutes of meetings where kidney fluoride studies were to be included, but in the final report they were mysteriously eliminated. When it came to the cancer studies, particularly Dr. Basson's study of osteosarcoma and fluoride being responsible for osteosarcoma, they dismissed that in about 3 lines, based upon a letter to the editor written by Professor Chester Douglas, who said that there will later be other reports coming out of his office that will show that Basson's study wasn't correct. Well, it's now 5 or 6 years after that time, and Dr. Chester Douglas is retired and he never produced these reports. So the NHMRC relied on a very flimsy letter to the editor in order to make their claim that there's no link between fluoride and cancer. So to this day, Basson's studies showing that young boys have a much higher incidence of osteosarcoma if they're exposed to fluoridated water. That is the best science that's ever been done on the subject. Yet the NHMRC dismissed it for no good reason.
Unbelievable. When we see these rising cancer rates and they refuse to look at perhaps a cause as being water fluoridation as a toxic chemical like a neurotoxin, and yet they dismiss.
Oh, it is unbelievable, because you would expect a body like Australia's NHMRC to have the highest standards of scientific integrity. But it's become apparent from just the 2 examples I've given, the kidneys and the bone cancer, that they had a goal to whitewash fluoridation and not to do a proper fearless study of the pros and cons.
What are your views, Marilyn, on the NHMRC report, and do you believe it addresses all fluoridation health concerns adequately?
No, I think it's a piece of garbage, actually. I personally told the head of the NHMRC, Warwick Anderson, when he was in Brisbane a couple of years ago, there was a really crappy report. Because it was basically based on the York University report of 2000, which was fine. They didn't do any more work on it. They only added in bits on salt fluoridation and milk fluoridation, which is not about water fluoridation. They never once looked at the effect of the cumulative effect of fluoride on people with kidney impairment, and yet through freedom of information we know that that was part of the tender, that they were required to look at the effect of fluoride on people with kidney impairment. They didn't do it. There was not a word in the final report. They also only just barely touched on thyroid effects, and that they said that fluoridation did not cause thyroid cancer. They never once touched on the effects that fluoride can decrease thyroid activity, and they have known this for 100 years. There's hundreds and hundreds of scientific publications linking fluoride to decreasing thyroid activity. Not a word in the NHMRC report.
It whitewashes many fluoridation concerns. And it didn't even address all of the issues that were put to it by the government. It cherry picks the information. It doesn't do any of its own studies. In fact, NHMRC is a government organisation that actually employs other contractors to do that work.
So what words of warning would you say to, first of all, the viewers, and then secondly, perhaps the authorities?
Do a proper review. Actually look at people. Do the health and safety studies that have never been done. Do it properly, do it decently.
Without proper scientific rigour, such reports are not worth the paper they are written on.
This was a privately contracted review, and I think it had a preordained result. Even the name of the report, the safety and efficacy of fluoridation, they never found it was safe, and it's certainly not effective.
So if the so-called science of fluoridation is so weak, and the best reviews that promoters refer to are so flawed, how do they get away with it? How do people feel about this? What are the ethical implications? Some promoters have been more prominent than others. Dr. John Carney in Victoria and Premier Anna Bligh in Queensland have come under particular scrutiny in recent years by professionals and the public alike as they spearhead Australia's two most aggressive forced fluoridation policies in their respective states.
And I ask a lot of people, do you know what fluoride is? And they'll go,
no, but the dentists say it's good for your teeth.
So we're talking mass ignorance of the population, but we're talking absolute deviousness by the puppet masters of fluoridation, getting the governments to do whatever they want.
The Health Fluoridation Act offers protection from rights of action for water supply authorities. If fluoridation is completely safe, why would such a preemptive legislative measure be necessary?
Well, of course, it's outrageous, really, isn't it? You can't sue the government for fluoridating your water, even if it's shown to be harmful. I think that's obviously wrong in principle, isn't it?
I think the time's coming when that legislation will be challenged in court cases. Personally, I don't think that'll stand up. I think a good barrister could have a field day with a piece of legislation that tries to prevent poisoners from being responsible for their poisoning.
What would you say to Premier Anna Bligh, who has fluoridated forcibly the water of Queenslanders?
She's declared war on Queenslanders. She truly has. It's the wrong thing to do, and she will pay for that. And if John Paul Langbrook gets elected, same thing will happen to him. He will be disposed of. People are very angry and very annoyed at the fact that they have to drink fluoridated water. Only 5% of Queensland was fluoridated for so long. Funnily enough, it was Townsville, and I know people who practice in Townsville. They have tooth decay in Townsville. Funnily enough, they have a lot of tooth decay. So no, Queensland was the smart state for quite a while. Now it's the join the club, dumbed down state. Crazy. Not good for tourism either, by the way.
Now, not even a single doctor can force a single patient to take a medication. They have to get the consent of the patient. So for example, for Dr. Carney in Victoria, the Chief Health Officer, to claim that he has the right to force millions of people in Victoria to swallow fluoride medication every day via their kitchen tap, that's way, way outside of his what his ethical powers should be. It's simply wrong.
David, do you agree that mandatory water fluoridation merits reasonable limitation of individual rights?
Oh, no, Dr. Carney's getting that completely wrong. The man's really a disgrace in the position of Chief Health Officer. Medication should not be given to people without their informed consent. It's as simple as that.
They just go too far. And one of the things about John Carney is that he has led, as far as I can see, a whole campaign which really denigrates the whole area of public health. In public health, he should tell the whole story, and he has only told half the story. I would dispute anything John Carney has to say on the benefits of water fluoridation. I think most people with any sort of a scientific background would dispute them. Anything that John Carney has said in the past has been open to dispute.
My feelings to Dr. Carney is that this man needs one-on-one experience with those who are affected by fluoride, and because his lack of experience with these sufferers, I can't see how it gives him any authority to speak on the principle of the matter.
How do you feel about Dr. Carney in the position that he's in, making decisions about people's health? So blanket.
Disgusting.
You feel disgusted? So what would you do with Mr. Carney?
Tip him out.
Tip him out.
So, are you a criminal because you're not paying your water rates?
I feel they are trying to make me into a criminal. I don't feel like a criminal. I feel like someone's father standing up for their damn children.
What would you say to other fathers?
Stand up with me. Stand up with me.
Yeah, like, I just don't like, sometimes I even question, is life worth living? And I've thought about it, but, you know, if I do that, that just makes the bastards who put this water, to did what they did to the water, just letting them get away with it. I need to stand and fight and try and gather as much strength as I can to make things go away and to make things the way they used to be. And I just hope that somewhere, somehow, somebody sees the light and the fluoride's taken out of our water, out of all of Australia's water, like the rest of the world, and then we can be healthy again. And they wonder why so many people are getting sick. Maybe they should look at fluoride as the reason.
Officials all around Australia who've hung their hat on fluoridation for 20 years or more, they're not ready to give it up now because they'll be exposed as having been wrong all these years, and once they're exposed as having been wrong, they're also liable then for all the health damage that it has caused people.
Beware of these governments. They've let you down, they've sold you out, and the whole community is suffering.
Being over the age of 21, I can enter into my own contracts and look after myself the way I want to. And even if I like a banana, I like bananas, nobody can make me eat a banana if I don't want to. It's a similar thing. This is a chemical rape. And this is what it is. It's a chemical rape. And the insanity of fluoride is easily seen in the logistics. I mean, if somebody wants fluoride tablets, then so be it. Go down to the chemist. If somebody wants fluoride, then let them take it. But for all of the rest of us that don't want it, then this is insanity to actually make us have it, or to expose us to it.
What would you say to authorities that have made these decisions?
They have opened themselves up for claims of damages against them individually.
They're there to feather their own nests and feather their own bank accounts. They'll do whatever it takes to get what they need and bugger the people. It really is outrageous. I don't know what happened to our Australians to get up and fight their guts out for what's right. We have to get the people to do something. We're in real trouble here.
Life isn't worth living without your health. It's about life. And fluoride takes our life away, our lifeblood, and that of future generations. We're passing this poison on to our future generations. And you know, how in the old days, Australia used to be one of the leaders in doing the right thing. It's very sad. And I think people need to wake up. Things are not going in a good direction. If they want to protect themselves and their family, they need to be aware of the issue and the science, to take the right precautions, to tell their friends and relatives, to talk to their politicians, to give their politicians confidence that, you know, they want something to happen, so that the politicians have more confidence that they can stand up for people's rights, so they're not afraid to be browbeaten by the system that wants to control them.
So what advice would you give to people drinking fluoridated water?
Just that I wouldn't drink it.
So I'd tell them not to be persuaded by the fact that your party or your country or your government or your language group favours fluoridation. Start looking at what benefits humanity, not what benefits your group, your professional association. Look at the real researchers, the people who are actually doing the research and finding the things that need unravelling and sorting out.
I think generally speaking, most people will vote against compulsory fluoridation. There are good reasons to vote against it if you've got the chance, and I think politicians should support that view, and they should tell members of their party and argue for that position within their own parties.
Why on earth would Australia go against the best scientific knowledge and most of Europe? Why on earth would we want to stick out as the ones that are in the dark ages? Especially if we're not prepared to do testing.
Well, that's where it gets to the question of just what on earth is going on.
In the United States, there are health warnings put out not to reconstitute baby formula with fluoridated water because of the damage that it can be done to a child under 12 months of age. This is the livelihood and the well-being of our children and grandchildren that is at stake here. I ask all of you out there that have concerns to write to your federal and state members demanding that water fluoridation stop now.
What would you say to these authorities that are ignoring the recommendations of the World Health Organisation's
Well, I feel that
reports?
they're all criminals, actually.
So what would you as a scientist say to politicians and maybe other doctors and scientists who haven't got the spine to stand up with you and fight this?
Well, it's extremely unscientific for a start, what they have done. And I wonder what the real agenda is, because we know that water fluoridation does cause harm to vulnerable members of the community. We do know that it's not effective.
And we have a right to expect our governments to provide us with clean, safe drinking water. And by adding fluoride, they're not doing anything to enhance the quality of our water. They are mass medicating against our will. It is against the Nuremberg Treaty to be doing this, and it breaks all medical ethics. So we have, actually, the grounds for public dissent and public disobedience.
We can't survive without water. Nothing on our earth can survive without water. Our earth is already polluted to such an extent that if you're not terrified, you should be. I'm asking you to join with everyone who's fighting water fluoridation in Australia, in America, in parts of England, Ireland, and the other countries who are silly enough, not many more, to put it in. Please, please do your own research. Take note of this documentary. Believe that it's true, because nobody in this, we do this for nothing. Many of us have done it for over 2 decades, running out, paying for our own websites to try and help you, the people, get the truth. We're not the fat pigs at the trough. We must get this truth out, and please call for a ban, demand it. Don't sit back, demand. Go to whoever you can and drive them insane and say, we want water fluoridation stopped, and we want it stopped now. We want it stopped permanently, and we want it stopped irrevocably, so that none of you guys can do your deals in the future and ever get it back. We have to stop it now. There is just too much collusion going on, and mainstream media should be absolutely ashamed that so many people have had to do this themselves and make so many other videos themselves trying to get the information to the people, the truth to the people. Because we care about our fellow human beings, we care about our environment, and we care about our entire planet. Thank you.
Australia is faced with a choice. Do we continue down the unethical, unscientific and indeed criminal practice of forcing toxic industrial pollution waste into all public drinking water? Or do we finally, after more than 50 years, say enough is enough and end this insanity once and for all? The choice is yours. Drink up, say nothing, or fight back. Peter, you grew up in Adelaide. Tell me what fluoride has done for you.
Yes, I grew up in Adelaide as a young boy, and for 25 years I brushed my teeth twice a day with fluoridated toothpaste, and I drank thousands and thousands of litres of fluoridated water, and I'd love to say that it gave me good teeth, but I'll show you what it did. That's what fluoride has done for me, right? I've had the worst teeth, and I can just imagine the dental profession going, oops, we made a mistake. Not. That's what it's done for me. Not happy.
This is Jessica. Why should this little girl have to bathe in and drink this toxic, corrosive, S7, untreated, unrefined, heavy metal contaminated industrial waste, scrubbed from pollution smokestacks? Why should she have to pay the price for decisions made by uninformed legislators making unethical decisions and vested interests, or those who deny the science, or those with their head in the sand? Should her father have to pay for poisoned water? Will you stand up with Scott, the father of this dear little girl? These are the sentinels, guardians, watchers, protectors of their families and the community, men of real spine. While most are sleeping peacefully, these men dedicate their nights to ensuring that when others awaken at dawn, they are informed to the truth that there is poison in the tap water, that this poison is cumulative, insidious, and those who force it into the water are nothing short of criminals. After all, who else is going to inform the community? Mainstream media? Of course not. Their complicit silence and suppression of the truth aids and abets the criminals, whilst the mantra of safe and effective is parroted unchallenged across the nation. Bless all these men and women who fight, courageous truth warriors who risk their own safety to protect yours. Will you stand up with them and for all the other sufferers? And the brave scientists, doctors, dentists, politicians, those brave enough who investigate, research and commit to the truth. Those who demand safe water.